I want to especially acknowledge Janet and Shayna and Jacqueline and the Soul Notes Band for your flexibility and your willingness to change the music to try to find something that fit a little bit better with very short notice to this morning. Thank you. So the lesson that I want to share this morning is not the lesson that I had planned to share this morning. I've entitled the talk, When Your World Falls Apart. On Friday day, I didn't have my television on or wasn't really paying much attention to the internet or anything. Friday evening, I joined with a group of people to celebrate at a friend's home and to have a lovely, festive party. And it was not actually until coming home that I began to hear bits and pieces of the news of the shooting at Sandy Brook Elementary School in Connecticut, and learned of the 26 and 7-year-olds that had been shot to death, and the 6 teachers that had been, and principal and counselor that had also been shot. And I stayed up very, very late on Friday, listening and trying to absorb the information and also being with my own heart and with my own feelings, and knew very clearly that there was no way that I could talk about what I had planned to talk about when I felt that as a spiritual teacher and minister, it was important to try to be together today and acknowledge what has happened, and also try to support one another in what do we do when things like this happen? What does it mean, and what does it feel like when our world falls apart? I do know that prevalent for so many of us is the big question, why? Why? What goes on in the mind of a 20-year-old young man that he takes a gun and he shoots his mother, and then he goes to an elementary school and opens fire? Why does that happen? Why do totally innocent children lose their lives? Why? Why do teachers stand in front and protect those children and lose their lives? We want the answer to why, don't we? Because we want to make sense. We want to make sense of it. That's a very human and very psychologically sound need. We want our world to make sense. Because when it doesn't, we're so thrown, it's so disorienting, and we don't know what to do. What I've come to realize, and I suspect it's true for many of us in this room, is that there are things that just don't make sense. Despite our demand or deep desire for them to do so, there are things that just don't make sense. And there are questions like the question why in this particular tragedy that probably have no answer at all. And that's true of many such tragedies. Columbine makes no sense, no answer to why. Virginia Tech makes no sense, no answer to why. 9/11 makes no sense, no answer to the question why. I'm reminded of the very first school shooting in our country that is often forgotten. It happened in 1979. I remember it because it was in my neighborhood. It was in San Carlos. It was at Cleveland Elementary School. I was in ministerial school at the time. It was January of that year. I was working at Silent Unity, and I remember getting off my shift and having my radio on and hearing that there was a shooting, and learned that it was at Cleveland Elementary School. My sister Laura attended there and heard the gunshots and was spared being shot, but 2 children lost their lives, as Brenda Spencer, 16-year-old girl who lived across the street. It was a Monday morning and she was bored and decided to open fire and took the lives of 2, and I forget how many she injured. These things make no sense, and when these questions are the big whys that make no sense, sometimes people go to, why does God let these things happen? In our teaching, we do not believe that God is an anthropomorphic being that lets these things happen or can stop these things from happening. We believe that we co-create as a human family our world together, consciously and unconsciously co-create our world and the circumstances that seem to allow or make these kinds of things a bit easier to happen or to happen more frequently. These are not punishments, though they feel terrible. They are, like the phone that is ringing somewhere, a wake-up call. They are. They're a wake-up call. They're a wake-up call, I think, to all of us. Waking up isn't pleasant or easy, is it? I mean, most of us, at least as adults, need an alarm clock to do that, right? Because we'd rather stay snuggled in bed and warm and not have to meet the responsibilities of being an adult. And so we use an alarm clock to wake us up. These things, as they happen, I think, need to be a wake-up call for us as a human family, and I use that word family very deliberately and very importantly. To wake up to what do we need to do together differently so that these things don't happen, so that we turn back the frequency of them to the point where eventually they cannot happen because it is unthinkable. Unity is a progressive spiritual path. Unity is a way of living, not just when it's easy, but a way of living in these very kinds of situations. Ours is a living faith, which means we pull it out, especially in times like these. It's not measured. Our spiritual growth and development isn't measured by how much we know. Knowledge can be helpful. In the beginning of our spiritual quest and journey, we read books, and many of us still continue, I know I do. But our spiritual development or maturity is not measured by how many great books we have read or written or how many great talks we've listened to or have given. It's not measured by those things. Our spiritual growth and development is measured by how well we have learned to seek the light in the midst of darkness. Darkness like we feel together in this country today. To still seek the light, to still know that what is most true of each other is the light. That is what is true. That is what is natural. And anything that shows up differently is a mistake that we have to figure out. How can we help correct that? By how well we have learned to find a deeper faith when we are feeling so much despair. How do we find a deeper faith in those times, in those situations? How do we love when all we feel like doing is crying? How do we forgive when it seems impossible to? Some of you may have heard the very brief and very emotionally touching, very real interview of the father of one of the girls who was shot and killed. I don't remember his name, but I will not forget his face or his sharing yesterday. His daughter's name was Emily. She was 6. And he talked about her personality and her sweetness and brightness, as any parent would. And he said, we must remember her, and we must remember all of the children, but we also must remember the shooter as well. We need to somehow find a way to forgive. What I know is that when people like that can say such a heroic and noble statement, that it really forces me to dig deeper and hold myself more accountable to doing that very same thing. As a minister, I have sat with people on many occasions, too many unfortunately, when their worlds were falling apart. I sat with the parents of a 21-year-old boy who took his infant son and drowned his infant son because the mother of his son wouldn't get married. And he did not want to raise the child alone. He was very mentally disturbed. I sat with his parents as they dealt with their world falling apart, that their child could take their grandchild and murder him. I've sat with the parents of a 7-year-old boy dying of cancer, made several visits to that family. At the same time, my own son was about 8 or 9. Could not help but draw the connections and feel the pain as that family prepared to say goodbye to their son and to deal with their world falling apart. And then stand and give one of the most difficult memorial services I ever had to do for that young boy. I've stood and hugged parents who lost their college son in a car accident. And though all the way over to their home to be with them, I prayed for the right words to say. I knew there could be no words to help when worlds fall apart. I've sat with a woman who found her husband on the kitchen floor after he had stabbed himself to death and took his own life. I've sat with a father who lost his wife, who was carrying their unborn child, 9 months pregnant. She had been wanting to learn to fly, and she took her first solo flight and didn't make it and crashed Montgomery Field, losing her life and the life of her unborn child. And I sat with the father. And in each of these cases did the memorial services for each of the families. When worlds fall apart. Every time I have been in that situation, every single time, there's only been one thing I've wanted to do. And that was to have a magic wand to make it all go away. To turn back the hands of time and put each of those people in a different place so their lives did not cross with the fate that happened to them. And each time, much like you if you were in a similar situation, would have prayed for and wanted to have the right words to say. And yet you would have fallen short, as I know I did with any words I ever said. But the one thing that I absolutely learned was that being fully present, just being fully present and real, was the most important gift I could ever give them, and was the only thing that could help the hurt a tiny bit. I'm reminded when I say that of a line in a song that Carl Anthony wrote. Most every one of you in this room know Carl Anthony. He had some very dear friends who had a child whose life was taken very suddenly. And he wrote a song in honor of them and in honor of the child. And in the song was a line. It was an invitation to the parents, an instruction. And the line was, hold on to each other when you can't hold on. Hold on to each other when you can't hold on. Because in those times and places in our lives when we're witnessing somebody else's world falling apart, the most important thing we can do is to be there for each other, to be fully present. We need each other. We need each other certainly in the most serious of times and situations like some of the ones that I've described, that are senseless, that are horrific, that just hurt so much. We need to be there during those times. But there are many other times that your presence is really genuinely needed in the life of somebody close to you. It may not be quite as horrific a situation as the ones we've been talking about, but you count. And who you are and how you are, and the heart and mind and consciousness that you bring to those times and places matters. You may be the only person in that situation that can reach out in the way that you would reach out. We need each other. I know I need you. And I believe you need me as well. Ours is a path of awakening, and ours is a path of growing. We need each other to awaken each other. Sometimes the awakening and sometimes the growth is easy and pleasant, and sometimes it's not. I know there have been times in your life that I have been sandpaper to your soul. I know, because sometimes you leave me these really mean notes about it. And you don't even sign your name, so I can't even try to explain or apologize if an apology is necessary. But I know that even if you're mad at me or you don't like a decision I make, you do need me. Not because of me, but because of what I might be triggering in you as an invitation to grow, something to look at. The same is true in reverse. There are times that you have caused me to grow that have been pleasant, and there have been many times that you have caused me to grow that haven't been pleasant or easy. But we need each other. What I learned is all I could do was be present, but that I could also do something that maybe would make a difference. Perhaps not a direct difference in the lives of those people that I mentioned a moment ago, knowing that in those situations all I could do was physically be there and hold space and love and care and cry with them and pray with them and simply be there. But also knowing that even though I couldn't turn back the hands of time and I couldn't take away what happened in their lives, that I could honor their pain by making a commitment to myself to do an even better job than I have in the past, to stay awake and to be conscious. I think that's a huge gift that we can give to our human family when we don't know what to do, when there isn't an easy answer to the question why. We can at least say, how can I be a better person, a kinder person, a more loving person in the midst of this painful wake-up call? And so, sharing very honestly with you and very simply with you, Friday's tragedy has invited me to make a deeper commitment to holding my family closer, my immediate family closer, which sometimes is hard to do as a minister with so many who sometimes may forget that I also have a family to care for as well, just as I know you do. But to hold them closer and hold them tighter. A friend of mine just this past week was sharing that her sister is going through great difficulties surrounding alcoholism and not being able to break that addiction, and it's causing her family to fall apart. Her husband's leaving her. There was an affair involved. And my friend said something very wise. She said, there's nothing more I can do for my sister. I've done everything I know to do. I cannot help her. But I am holding my family so close to me right now and cherishing them even more than I ever have before. So I'm holding my family closer. I'm also challenging myself to make more real to my family my words, I love you. I say them often. And I'll often follow them by saying, not just I love you, but have you felt my love today? Have you felt my love today? Because I have been on the receiving end, as I bet some of you have as well, in some relationships, having been told the words I love you, but never, ever, ever having any actions that actually were congruent with those words. And instead feeling that those words were just empty and convenient and didn't really mean anything at all. So I'm challenging myself each day. I've kept a gratitude journal for years and years and years, every single day. But I'm challenging myself to specifically ask, Wendy, what did you do today to nurture your marriage? It's a strong one, but I mustn't take it for granted. And I love you only goes so far, the words. I'm challenging myself to ask, Wendy, what did you do to nurture your relationship with your son? Yeah, he's about to graduate from college next year, and he's at that stage in his life where he wants to be so independent, and he is. And he may not need the nurturing, but I need to give it. I want to give it. And challenging myself to ask Wendy, how have you nurtured Jennifer today? And did you do these things in a way that they felt it? We each have what's called our own love language. There are 5 of them. We don't all speak the same love language. And so the way I show love to one needs to be the way that that one can understand and receive that love. There's a great book by that title, Love Language, that if you're interested might be helpful. And then lastly, and this is something that came to me just yesterday that I'm taking on as my personal mantra. And it is the phrase, to move at the pace of love. To move at the pace of love. Because when I'm honest with myself, I move at the pace of my calendar, which is overwhelming. And I move at the pace of my to-do list, which is never ending. And many times those two things are in conflict with moving at the pace of love, especially among the people and friends that are the nearest and dearest to me. Hold them tight. As I look out among you, I know some of you are just brought babies home and are celebrating new life. Hold them tight. Hold your loved ones tight and close. Don't ever, ever, ever take them for granted or assume that they will always be here. Namaste. Thank you.